And we're going first. I'm just going to get our slides set up then.
That sounds great. And we'll give everyone another 2 whole minutes to trickle in.
Thank you, Emily. My computer shows 1:30. Should I get started?
Yes, it's time to begin. Welcome to session 2A, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your 30-minute break, maybe got a snack, maybe got something to drink. I'm going to be monitoring chat for this session and moderating as well. We also have members of our planning committee here in the chat. We have 3 presentations in this session and just an hour to get through it. So we'll have 15-minute presentations. I'll be keeping track of time and jumping in whenever you're a minute close to your time. All questions should go into the Q&A component at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Participants are welcome to upvote, answer, comment upon the questions. If there is time in an individual session, we'll throw a couple questions in. If not, we'll save all questions until the end. With that said, I will turn it over to our fantastic presenters and we'll get started.
Thank you, Janessa. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yongting Fu. Today, I'm presenting with my colleagues Emily Ludeman and Emily Gorman on a project that we did to compare the tools to manage systematic review workflows. Next slide. Before we start, I'm just going to give a little bit of background about our library services. So the three of us are the research and education librarians at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, which is one of the biggest public universities in the state of Maryland. Along with other 4 faculty librarians, we make up a team of 7 librarians that provide systematic review services to the University of Maryland campus. And just another bit of information about our library. We primarily serve the 6 professional schools on campus. Also, we have affiliation with the hospital under the UMM system, which receive many of the residents every year. And those residents are affiliated with the School of Medicine. So with that in mind, it is not surprised that we receive many of the requests every year for many types of reviews. Back in 2013, when we started the systematic review services, no one has realized how popular this service will become. The librarians we always work on reviews based on the availabilities, but not on the disciplines. Each of the research and education librarians also have liaison roles, but we only work on the reviews on our availabilities. So over the years, we gradually feel the chaotic feeling of managing all the big amount of reviews we receive every year. So that is the time we consider to seek out a better tool to help us manage the reviews. So we can provide a better, more smooth service to our patrons, also to reduce the library burnout for ourselves. So now I'm going to turn it to Emily Ludeman, who is going to talk about the tools we use.
Thank you, Ting. Our team has been relying on our in-house software, which was created by our library's programmer in 2019. This systematic review portal, as we call it, enables us to claim new projects, track their status, and update records as needed. And its functions are pretty standard. A requester places or fills out a form on the library's website. The systematic review team, and here I'm referring to our librarian team, receives an email alert, and then a librarian claims the review in the portal. Our portal has not undergone major updates since it was created 5 years ago, and we began to wonder if it's still meeting our needs or whether another tool might offer more flexibility, autonomy, and sustainability. And we identified 2 other tools that we're interested in. So that's Microsoft Lists and Airtable. And our objectives with this project were threefold. We wanted to compare the characteristics and functionality across all 3 tools, map the tools against systematic review project requirements, and then ultimately determine which tool was best suited to our systematic review service. First, I'm going to talk just for a minute about our portal. And this is the landing page for our portal. Once we receive an alert notification, we come here to claim the request. And as you can see, the portal has a pretty streamlined look, and it has tabular navigation across the top according to review status. The full record you can view by clicking on the review ID number, and here's just a portion of the review record. So I'm actually going to go into our portal for a moment here. So here's a full record. Each one contains basic information about the requester, so affiliation, department, etc. Basic review information, like the question. We ask if they've completed a protocol when they submit the request. And then the portal also keeps a log of review status. So anytime it's been updated, we can see when it's moved. It's tracking records through the review stage. And though this system does still function, it doesn't have the sophistication of newer proprietary tools. And so we wondered if our portal is still meeting our needs, or if another tool could offer more functionality and workflows. Okay, and that brings us to Microsoft Lists. Lists is part of Office 365. In terms of use, we determined that it had a pretty easy learning curve in terms of using it once you get your system set up, but setting it up was a pretty moderate learning curve. You can add records manually or through a form, and the ability to manually add records is something that we're really interested in here, and it's been missing from our portal. We've honestly wanted this function in our portal for years. We haven't had it yet, but there is a lot of customization available in Lists. Airtable, as you can see, looks very similar to Lists. They both use like the spreadsheet sort of format. This is just a portion of our Airtable that we set up to test this. So if you wanted to view the whole thing, you would have to do quite a bit of scrolling, like in a spreadsheet. Again, the learning curve, it's easy to use, moderate to set up. And one thing that sets it apart from Lists is that you have options for creating alerts or notifications. You have more options. In Lists, you really only get an alert when a new record is added to the system. So both Lists and Airtable have the spreadsheet format. They're very similar in style and functionality. As you can see, they look very much alike. But Emily's going to talk about some other key similarities and key differences between the tools.
Great, thank you for that introduction to the tools that we looked at. So some of the similarities that Emily just mentioned are on here. Some additional similarities between lists and Airtable are that you can attach files to the records, which would be helpful for attaching protocol documents to their corresponding review records in the system. And that's something that we again can't currently do in our homegrown portal. And both tools also have the capability of exporting to Excel and or the CSV spreadsheet format. And both also have visualization tools available to add on or to extend kind of analysis of all of the records that you have in your system to do analysis. Next slide. So in terms of differences, one of the biggest differences between the tools is actually the cost. So as Emily mentioned, lists is included in Microsoft 365. So if your institution already uses that, you're not going to have to pay anything extra to use lists. Whereas Airtable has a freemium structure. So the free tier supports up to 5 users, which would work well if your service includes 5 or fewer librarians. But for larger teams, the pricing would be tiered based on the number of people using it. And then both tools also include some search functionality to locate specific records. List kind of has the full features available by default. In Airtable, you have to add extensions to include advanced search options to be able to search all the records that you have in your list. And then another major difference that we came across was related to accessibility. So Microsoft provided kind of official guidance on screen reader support for lists, whereas we couldn't really find any accessibility guidance from Airtable at the time that we looked. And in fact, what we did see were posts on a community forum and an analysis shared by the Digital Library Foundation that that all suggested Airtable is not very accessible. I tested each one's capability to support kind of zooming in on the page, and this worked a bit better in lists than in Airtable. In both of them, zooming in is okay to a certain point. In lists, it just begins to be difficult to tell what record you're looking at when you're scrolling across kind of the spreadsheet. But in Airtable, the list of records just kind of disappears entirely and you get stuck in the side and top navigation menus with no way to scroll through your list of records. So lists seemed to be more accessible than Airtable in that regard. So just to summarize, lists and Airtable definitely both work well for tracking review workflows. The biggest factors in deciding between one or the other are likely to be pricing and accessibility. And our decision ended up being to ask our programmer to add some functionality to our homegrown portal. So some of the functions we mentioned that we don't already have, like being able to attach files. But lists will be our kind of backup alternative if improvements to the portal still don't kind of address everything that we were hoping to get from it. And finally, you can get more information on lists in Airtable. This slide just links to their product pages, and then our full comparison of all of the characteristics that we looked at for the 3 systems is linked here. And I'm also about to have it show up in the resources tab in Zoom as well. And it's also on our OSF site, so you can see our full comparison of these tools there. And you're also welcome to email us with any questions that we're not able to answer today. Thank you.
That was perfect timing. I just unmuted for your 1-minute warning. Thank you for the work that you've done. We're going to switch to our next presenter now, but we have a number of questions that have been put in the Q&A. I know y'all have been answering as we go, and for our Q&A session at the end, we'll get to any outstanding questions. That being said, I will turn it over to Cecilia Vetter and let you take over.
All right, thank you so much. And then, hello, my name is Cecilia Vetter, and today we are going to be talking about our project from search request to publication, another project management tool for these evidence synthesis. So first of all, my project is not just me, Cecilia Vetter, it's also my colleague, Hannah Craven. And we also have another colleague, Julia Stump, who's visiting one of our regional campuses today. So it's just Hannah and I presenting. So first, where are we going today? We're going to talk about what our team needed, how we made what we needed, and then also how it's going. So first, to give you some context, I and Hannah and Julia are all from the Ruth Lilly Medical Library, which is part of IU School of Medicine. So we are part of a team of 7 librarians who regularly conduct evidence synthesis searches, and we only serve the School of Medicine through Indiana University. So what was the issue that we were having? So our evidence synthesis service was and is in very high demand. Previously, we had a more decentralized process for assigning search projects. So a librarian would receive a request either through their personal work email or if they were on our reference email and they happened to have a shift then. And the thing was, if that librarian was too busy to take on that search, it was kind of their responsibility to find another colleague who could then take that search. So maybe sending an email out to all of the librarians here. And so this kind of led to a diffusion of responsibility, and it really led to some extra stress on that librarian who received the request and was trying to find another librarian to take it over. We did have a spreadsheet, but it was cumbersome and really underutilized by our team for tracking our projects. And this spreadsheet didn't really show what our current workload was, or didn't have a way to establish a wait list when we had too many requests for what our librarians could manage at a time. And so this kind of lack of coordination made it really hard for us to adequately and effectively prioritize our resources. So what did we need? We needed some way to funnel all of our search requests into a centralized place. We also needed a wait list. We needed a way to record these search requests that were coming in that we couldn't take at the moment. And also so it wasn't the single responsibility of the librarian who happened to receive that request. And lastly, we wanted a tool that was easy to learn, a short learning curve. And so we were looking for a project management tool that could create a centralized place to manage our service, improve our transparency, and effectively manage our substantial workload.
All right, so I'll discuss how we made it. Next slide. So first we had to figure out, like our previous presenters and such, what tool we wanted to use. We had a call out to a few listservs, and some people who are probably in this Zoom room probably responded. So thank you so much. We're so appreciative, of course, of our helpful community. For example, we met with people from Sladen Library at the Henry Ford Hospital. We also watched that Michigan webinar about Airtable and managing systematic reviews. So we did a lot of background exploration, and then we explored, like the previous presentation, our suite of Microsoft products that we have available to us in our institution subscription. And that's where we found Microsoft Planner. And our IT department also had training materials specific to that. So we landed on that, which can be embedded into Teams, which I know we all love Teams, but I choose to use it in my internet browser. Highly recommend that. Next slide. So then we had to get to testing it and learning how to use it ourselves, and most importantly, buy-in for the change management. So we learned how to use it ourselves first, again, using the training that was provided by our IT resources, and also just playing around with it. So then we did some beta testing. We made what we call cards, or they probably call it cards, with dummy projects or old projects to populate the planner board. And then once we felt comfortable with that, we demonstrated this to our library's leadership to get the buy-in. So we demonstrated how this is really modular and easy to use, but also how it gives us data and charts pretty quickly, which Cecilia will show later. And then let's see, overall, it was just way easier to visualize everything at once than our previous unused spreadsheet. So this was approved by our leadership, and we got support from them. This was really important because we do not have a point person running the systematic review service like some other people have discussed here today. So that is kind of interesting here at our library. So we really needed the support for this to come from the top down, because a lateral person telling you what to do is not really effective. But anyway, it was not a tough sell because many of our colleagues were grateful. Next slide. So we did need to adapt Planner to our needs. Not everything was like straight across perfect. So in our next slide, I'll go through our specific columns that we created. That was pretty easy, but otherwise we curated those columns and the tags that they use as labels. And some things are now like a misnomer. So just taking a glance at it, you'd have to know our training to know that like due date does not mean it's due or overdue. It's just for us, that means now that's the date we sent the search results to the researchers in Covidence. So when Planner says it's late, that actually is good because it means our search results were sent and are not our problem anymore. We don't use some of the features like the priority field or like the repeat recurrence feature and a few others. Next slide. So the way we set it up really goes from the beginning, like search, request, inquiry, all the way to that scholarly product. So we start with needing that intake or that screening meeting. And then not all of our librarians do systematic reviews. So we have the signifier that this meeting has been scheduled. And then once we've gone through and decided, yes, this is a systematic review project or scoping review project, it becomes part of the wait list. And that's when it needs to be assigned to a librarian. That we also have something for waiting for a protocol. There's been discussions in the chat all day about is a protocol required. We loosely do require a pretty good draft. Then we have search in progress. That's when it falls onto us. Search results sent. And then anticipating final draft, that's when like we've been asked to write the methods section and provide the appendices and such and so forth. And then we get to published or presented product. You'll notice we have a graveyard because a lot of things can become zombie reviews. But we don't delete those cards. We put them in the graveyard because, you know, they can always come back being zombies. So that we have that. Next slide. So then we are ready to integrate it into our workflow. We created a README file with lots of instructions for our internal processes and described all of those niche uses of those fields that I described earlier, and including like file naming conventions and things like that. We then offered 2 separate trainings for our coworkers if they wanted step-by-step use. And then we also integrated this is really important. It's a standing agenda item in our bi-weekly department meetings. So we just check in every meeting to look at the wait list and then just ask if anybody has a card that they want us to move or something like that, just to keep everyone aware and keep using it. Next slide.
All right, so how has this process been going for us? So we, Hannah, Julia, and myself built our planner in the way we needed it last spring. And so starting about a year ago, like end of May, early June 2023, we officially started having these cards put in. And so what that looks like is this is an image from our planner. And we have it set up so that you can see it in columns. And this allows us to visually track each card or each systematic review process as it moves throughout our service. So when we are checking in bi-weekly as a group, we're pulling this planner up and just taking probably 2 minutes of our staff time, a little bit more if there's some things we need to talk about, just to say, is there anything from the wait list that's ready to go and be taken on? Does anyone have a question or they're not sure where their card goes? And so we have it set up. And so this is the first half. It's a very like long planner. So then this is the second half. And as you can see, we have our images. They're each going from left to right. There is a way to reorganize this kind of in a more spreadsheet looking way, but this is the way that I tend to access it. On our cards, we've created tags for whether it's scoping or systematic review. We have information on like the faculty name. And as Hannah mentioned, we're using the due date feature in Planner to say when we sent off those searches. So they're showing up as red because technically, according to Planner, it thinks they're overdue, but that just tells us, okay, March 7th, we sent these results to that faculty member. And then we have our graveyard, like Hannah mentioned, which we can take things in and out as need be. And we even put things where we maybe got a request for a search and then it became more of like a mediated search or some other literature review. Right now, we're still putting all of that in our graveyard so that we can assess what kind of requests we're getting that don't actually turn into full evidence synthesis projects. This is a zoom in on what one of the cards look like when you open it. So you can see we have the tag. We normally would have a librarian assigned to it. I created a dummy version of our planner just so that we could remove all faculty and librarian names for privacy's sake. It's called a bucket. That's essentially the columns those cards go into. We use that start and end date to emphasize when did we do the search. And then we really utilize the notes field to record like our meeting history with that faculty member. Once something is published, this is also great because sometimes our products that are coming out aren't always manuscripts. Sometimes it's our faculty will present something at a national conference. And so the best place to record that is in these notes. There's also the ability to add Word documents to these cards. You can also add URL links. So when something is published, I usually add that PubMed link directly to that record. And then the other thing that I didn't realize when we started with Planner is once you've created a card, any information you put on it, once you click away from the card, it automatically saves. So we don't have the issue of people putting a ton of information and then accidentally not saving. This is great when there's 7 of us in this planner, moving our cards around and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the data that we have so far. Like I said, we've only been using this in our team for about a year. And we kind of had a little bit of a gradual start where some of us were trying it out and then the whole team took it on. I got this from the charts feature of Planner. So it's just one of the ways you can look at it. And what it is we have a section Each of these lines is one of our columns. And so we have an area where the search hasn't been started, the search is in progress. The red is where we've sent those search results on, and then completed means that we've landed in that final product. And then our graveyard also gives us information as like, have we sent those searches yet? So at this point, we do have 8 published or presented products, and we have quite a few in this anticipating publication. We, I think, are still trying to figure out how to best use this data, especially when reporting that in our like annual review to our dean. But this is just a beginning, because before this, we didn't have a good way to say these are the projects that have led to publication.
1 minute warning, 1
All
minute.
right. And then our final next steps is the thing that's great about Planner is it's modular. So we're actually going to be switching 2 of our columns. So we're going to ask for a protocol to be established before we put a search on the wait list. So that's a newer thing we're working on with our team. We also don't right now have a great sense of how long projects sit on our wait list. And so we can use some of those timestamps that we're typing into the notes feature. And then we're hoping to report our publications better to our administration. Thank you so much. Our slides are available here, and I believe in the chat.
Thank you all so much for your presentation. The chat kind of took off there for a minute. We also have a number of questions going on in the Q&A, some of which are open to everyone to answer, but we'll revisit those at the end. That being said, we'll transition into our next presentations now. This will be from Layla and Steph.
Hello, everybody. My name is Layla Ledbetter, and I am presenting today for me and Steph Hendren. We are both from the Duke University Medical Center Library. What I'm going to be talking about today is, let's see if I can get this to go. Oops. Is data extraction. Steph will be presenting tomorrow on risk of bias and helping our teams with risk of bias. This is a class we co-teach together. We just present all the data stuff at once. And Steph's here today to just help answer questions in the chat. So why do we help our teams with data extraction? Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I learned how to do systematic reviews, I was basically told I did the searches and then I shoved them off to the person, and that was the last I saw of the team. But that is not actually how it played out in real life. We frequently got questions about data extraction. So often, in fact, they're like showing up. We've set ourselves up as experts about this process, about the methodology. So they get to the data extraction part and they say, well, now what? Now what do we extract? And I'm like, oh no. And I didn't know anything about it because nobody had taught me. So I started digging. We do not help them with their data extraction. Instead, what we do is we provide them tips and guidance and best practices and a class to help them get started. And the reason we do this is it greatly improves the quality of their projects, and it also really helps them be more efficient and get those projects finished faster and actually finishing them. So the first time that you really do help them with data extraction in the entire process is if you're one of the institutions that requires a protocol, or you just strongly encourage a protocol, or even if they just want to do a protocol, there's actually a whole question, several questions about what data they plan to collect, how they plan to collect it, and how they plan to present it. And we're asking our people for protocols. We don't require them. And so as soon as they get to that, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know yet. And we really think that knowing in detail what they're planning to collect is just one, super helpful for this protocol part, but also really, really helps them with their inclusion and exclusion criteria and with the screening. It just makes the screening go so much better. So this is all stuff that people feel happens downstream that actually helps with the process upstream. So where do we start when they ask us, oh my gosh, now what do I do? We go straight to handbooks and manuals. I love the Cochrane Handbook Chapter 5. I am not a big manual reader. I have not read the entire Cochrane Handbook, shame on me. But I love Chapter 5 and I direct people to it because I feel like it makes this very complicated, scary subject pretty straightforward. They've got charts and tables and it's very streamlined and there's bullets. And so I say, go look at Cochrane. Cochrane will get you in the right direction. If they are doing not just your average, interventional SR, but if they're doing a qualitative review, for example, Cochrane also has chapter 21. And qualitative reviews are very sticky in and of themselves. You really have to think about your data in a really different way than you would your average, RCT. And Cochrane offers some really excellent advice on how they should approach that, if they should be using their framework, what software to use. So I also direct them there if they're not 100% sure what kind of review they're going to be doing. And I wanted to toss this in. Someone brought this to my attention just recently. It was published last year by JBI, and it is a whole article on data extraction and presentation of results in scoping reviews. And it is really interesting if you've not read it. Again, scoping reviews are kind of a little bit of their own thing. They've got a lot of data. They're not 100, and it's messier than it would be in an SR. And this really does help people sort of get their heads around how they're going to present their data if we've talked them into a scoping review. Okay, so then they say, well, what data? What data should I collect? And believe it or not, that happens a lot. So I always start them with their question framework. I say, okay, it can be Pico, which is what I've used here, but there are other question frameworks. We don't force our people to use Pico. It just depends on what their project is. But having that structure, like, okay, well, who's your population? What are your interventions, and all the little bits and pieces that they have to sort of lay out in their question framework or think about in their question framework gets them started. Like, they can start writing things down on a piece of paper. It isn't quite so overwhelming. One of the things that I have found is that I need to stress during this part of the process, this little bit I have in orange here, is to make sure that they are collecting data and reporting data on stuff that their readers are going to care about. Like, if there's someone's going to pick up their review, what are they going to read? What are they going to want to read? If they picked up this review, what are they going to read? Because I think that they're all very, very worried about collecting everything, or they have really, really focused on a particular aspect and may not think about other things that their readers might be interested, or questions their readers might be interested in having answered. So I say, if you were going to pick up this paper, what would you want to see this answer? And so that sometimes help them focus on what data they plan to collect. And then we start creating the data extraction form. So it is really, really common for teams to collect too much stuff or to get lost in the weeds. And so what I say is, keep your question in mind, like, keep reorienting yourself to your question. Also, keep in mind what you're planning to do with that data. So for everything you're planning to collect, think about your question or how you're planning to analyze it, because they do not want to get to the end of their data extraction with all this mess that they don't know what to do with, or they spent a lot of time collecting it, the entire team did, so it's just slowing down their process, and then they end up doing nothing with it. So really getting them to just ask themselves, what am I going to do this? What does this answer? Of course, we always direct them to their seed papers, their example papers. Look at the ones you're going to include and decide what you want to capture from that. Does your form help you gather data from those articles? And then, for the people who don't want to reinvent the wheel, look for an existing systematic review on their topic and see what they've collected. Is there something that they would collect instead? Is there stuff that they don't plan to collect? That really gives them a starting point, and it doesn't feel quite so scary. And as they see, it worked successfully for this paper. So that gives them the confidence to get started on it. Down here at the bottom, and these slides are in the chat in the resources section, I have included links through all of this presentation that will get you to all of these things for you and for your teams. All right, so then they're creating their form. I always encourage them to think really clearly about what tables and figures they're going to put in their paper, right? Because that's what the data is going to create. So what data and tables, so they're going to have a characteristic table. They're going to have to collect the characteristics of their papers. What figures, what data is going to need to make those figures. So that will go in their form. And then when they're putting together the form, believe it or not, they don't always think really consciously about grouping their data. Like, do you want all the stuff in the paper to be in the same place in the form, or do you want it spread out to where that is going to be analyzed? So think about how they're planning to analyze and group their data in the form so it makes it easier. The next big piece of advice I always give is making sure on their data form to ask close-ended or limited answer questions. So a list of responses: North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, a yes or no, really specific number, and not just big open. I know that you have to with qualitative, not big open text blocks, because the more open text you have, the messier their data is going to be. More conflicts, more differences in opinion of the way it's expressed, and that's all data cleanup at the end. So the more things that you can sort of force people to answer the same, the better. It makes for cleaner data at the end. Always include a, not applicable or not reported, because otherwise you don't know, did somebody just forget to gather this? Was there nothing there? Did it accidentally get deleted? Who knows? So having a non-applicable is always really helpful. They should never ever guess at the answer. So they're reporting just what is in the paper. And even though they can say, I can make a educated guess that they must have done this, or this must be true because of this. If it's not written down, they don't report it. No guessing, no making assumptions. And then finally, I'm not a math person. You do not want me to do math calculations in my data extraction form. So anytime where there's like a judgment required or like a calculations or something like that, have them record the raw data and do that calculation later. This also allows for some variation in how that's reported. So for example, if one paper reports in millimeters and another one reports in centimeters, you at least know that, and you can make those conversions later on, but don't have your data extractors do it. It slows it down, could make mistakes. Okay, piloting, the most important thing. And if you can really push your teams to do this, I would encourage you. It ensures if they pilot test it, they ensure they have all the information and they're not wasting any time extracting stuff they don't want to extract. This is a big deal. Most people do extract more than they need to. And ideally, you want this piloting done actually prior to doing your protocol, right? Because they have to report on all that data bit in their protocols. But that's not always realistic. A lot of teams, at least a lot of my teams, don't know exactly what they're doing until after their title abstract screen. They've gotten to full text and they're like, okay, I think we know what we want now. So they can, at that point, do their pilot testing of their data extraction form. Remember, you can register your protocol up to the point you touch data extraction. I don't think data piloting counts. So up till full text, then they can register their protocol. Okay, piloting, if you need to sell it to them, this is the way to do it. It's going to keep you from having to edit your template while you're extracting. So let's say you have 30 papers and you're 10 papers in and you decide that you need a new column on your data extraction form. You're gonna have to go back and do those 10 papers. All the people who did it have to go back and redo it. You do not want to have to edit your form as you're going along. You don't want to get all the way to the end and go, oh, we should have extracted that. Have to go back and do all 30 papers. And then you really want, if you've piloted it, you really will know what data and how to collect it. So you won't have to spend as much time doing data cleanup and making sense of stuff at the end. You'll have had a chance to sort of see what that plays out like in your pilot test. And we always encourage them to go through and pick out different types of studies, so RCTs, cohorts, whatever that they're going to have in their includes, and try their data extraction form on each of those study types, because the data is going to look different. So that's going to change their form. All right. So piloting is actually training your data extractor. So you're doing a 2-for-1. So make sure that you, while they're piloting, you're training the team about what data should be expected in each of these things. Strongly encourage some kind of coding guide. So if you have a little manual, or if you build it into the form, little pop-ups or instructions on what should go in that question. Is it text? How much text? Is it 2 decimal points? Whatever, just so that everybody's sort of recording very similar data. Make sure that they are, again, when you're piloting, make sure that their data looks similar. And then you're going to have to change the form if your extractors all look different, because somebody isn't the form isn't clear enough and somebody isn't understanding. And then of course you're going to do revision after revision as you discuss and figure things out through that pilot. The teams I've had do this have said it has been invaluable. They are so glad they did it, made it so much of a difference, made doing their final data analysis so much better, that I would just, this is so valuable for the entire process. So push on them playing with and piloting their data extraction form. And then of course, keeping track of any changes, just in case you get to the end and you can't remember why you decided to include something or leave something out.
1 minute.
Okay. It says in the manuals that one person can do data extraction with someone checking behind it, but they have said that it's really important. A lot of studies have said it's really important for 2 people to do it. You've got 2 independent data extractors or each other's quality control. So I do always lean into that. Please do that to my people. They don't always love it, especially if there's a lot, but and then finally, software. We did talk about forms. If you have Covidence or Distiller, they have forms built in. If you do not, I strongly encourage you to use some kind of form software like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, because it allows you to put those instructions in. It allows you to format what your cells look like, so what that data is going to look like, helps for cleaner data and helps for compiling. I know that there are Excel templates out there. However, they're missing a lot of these options, but people do love them because it's straightforward. They don't have to learn how to use a piece of software. But I feel like it is rife with mistakes, Excel. So I do prefer a form software. Covidence has very nicely put together a tool agnostic guide on data extraction and a planning checklist. You can get this from free from the Covidence site. And this is a great, if you are not going to heavily lean into teaching your teams, you can at least hand this to them. It includes all this information and things that they need to think about. So go there and you can link these. These are both links for you to click on. And then finally, some additional resources that I have found that you all might find useful, that my teams have found useful. And thank you very much.
Right on time. Thank you so much for your presentation and the presentations from everyone in this amazing block. I feel like I've walked away with a page of notes of very practical things I should consider moving forward. We're going to transition now into 10 minutes or 9 minutes of Q&A so that we can still ensure a 5-minute break before our next session. I know that we have one outstanding question from the Q&A, and that question is for Layla and Steph. For form creation, how do you reconcile encouraging teams to use closed-ended questions with encouraging them to record the data exactly as it's exported, which they imagine would require an open-ended question? So how do you balance that?
Layla, I can take a first stab since you've just been talking for a little bit. I think it would, and this would be something where we would encourage the team to probably do a little bit of a pilot. That's one of the benefits of really testing out your data extraction form and seeing what the variability in the data itself is showing. So for instance, one option I could see is you could have kind of a standard like thematic description that you are translating all of the actual answers to. So if someone said that they, for instance, were doing like meditation as an intervention, but then they were also doing like journaling, you could both translate those to like personal self-care interventions, and that is the specific radio button that you would click into if that's enough information to actually answer your research question. If you do truly need that level of detail in there, maybe the full text screen would be the option to go with, but that's where the team would really need to figure that out themselves. Otherwise, I'm trying to think, Layla, some other options too would be providing just a larger description in their radio button. So for instance, if you're looking for specific numbers, instead of reporting, 12 and 84 and 1, you could have ranges from 1 to 10, 11 to 20, and have those kind of group in. Again, if that perfectly answers your research question, some do need a level of detail, and that's something that you probably would have to do a full text box for. Layla, do you agree, or am I missing anything?
They can sort that out as they're going. They'll figure out, right? I just always remind them that they're going to have to make sense of the mess at the end. So in some cases, they could pick a radio button and then add more detail in like a follow-up box. That's some of the ways we do it. But I say, if you feel really strongly about it, then make it a text box, but you're going to have to make sense of it at the end.
Thank you so much for answering that question on the spot. You're in the hot seat. Next, I'm going to shift to a question that got lost in our Q&A a little bit for a while, but came in for Cecilia and Hannah. An anonymous attendee asked, do the librarians involved in your service have departmental liaison responsibilities as well? And if so, does that impact the reaction or response from faculty and students when they might submit a request and it gets picked up by a librarian who isn't their liaison?
Yeah, I think for us, so we do all have liaison departments, but we take those systematic reviews kind of on a first come, first serve basis. But also, I think because we are still communicating our wait list, most people are happy to get a librarian to start working with them. They are always welcome to wait, but we can't really promise when that specific librarian would have time. And so for right now, we're just trying to kind of get people through our system as efficiently as possible.
And I will say, I had my title was Research and Scholarly Communications Librarian, and I felt I was getting more cold calls than other people. So I changed my title to just be Scholarly Communications Librarian. I think they were seeing my title and just being like research. So I don't have any data to back up if that helped, but now I have the wait list. So even if I didn't change my title, it wouldn't have mattered. So.
That's a really good point.
Another thing I should not have answered because Cecilia knew the right answer. Cecilia mentioned that we can export our planner data as an Excel file.
Microsoft makes sure their products work together.
And I'm a Mac user, so go figure.
Well, fantastic. I'm not seeing any other currently open questions. That being said, everyone, please, the recordings are available. Presenters have been invited to share their slides as accessible. And we want to thank our presenters from all three groups, all three teams, for your knowledge, for sharing all of these intricacies. And we'll have a short break before our next session starts at the half hour. So thanks, everyone. See you at the next one.